So hello and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be doing something a bit different. I'm going to be going over a GTA San Andreas theory and mystery. And that is, how did Officer Tenpenny catch CJ in the introduction? So in the lore to San Andreas, we know that Tenpenny caught CJ because he kinda needed somebody to blame the death for Officer Pendlebury and to sort of use CJ as a puppet. But the more you look into the lore, the less it makes sense. So let's go over the death of Ralph Pendlebury first. So in order to set the scene, we need to establish the introduction. Not the in-game introduction, but the 30-minute special one. So, towards the end of that mini-film, we see Tenpenny and Pulaski are beating up Ralph Pendlebury and forcing Hernandez to shoot him. And all of this takes place in Ocean Docks. Now, all of this is very likely to have taken place before CJ even arrived in Los Santos. We know that Crash have just killed fellow officer Ralph Pendlebury near Ocean Docks, which is extremely close to the airport. So going off that, we know there is a very short time window between the death of Pendlebury and CJ's arrival in Los Santos. So, let's go over some theories to this. Theory number one is that someone told Tenpenny that CJ was returning to Los Santos. So this plays into the theory that Tenpenny knew Carl was coming home and needed to execute his plan to murder Pendlebury quickly in order to frame CJ. We need to establish this scene correctly. So we'll be going over both San Andreas intros, the in-game one and the 30-minute special scene. So we know CJ is coming home to attend his mother's funeral after she was caught up in the Ballers drive-by. Now of course this is backed up in the intro itself, where Tenpenny sarcastically asks CJ about his wonderful family, to which CJ says he's here to bury his mom, you know that, and Tenpenny of course responds with yeah I guess I do. So how would Tenpenny know this? Well, Tenpenny did organise the drive-by on Grove Street, and they were intending to kill Sweet, not Beverly. So the extremely likely outcome to this is Tenpenny knew the drive-by was done, but most likely wasn't happy about the missed target. It doesn't really take a genius for anyone to think they would miss their own mother's funeral. Well, that's if they're on good terms, that is. So Tenpenny probably knew CJ would be flying back for that. But of course, here's the thing, the timing of CJ's arrival and Pendlebury's death. For the most part, the 30-minute intro film is very consistent in setting up the story. We have Smoke trying to convince Ryder, Tenpenny setting up the drive-by, the stuff with Torino and Ken Paul, but the drive-by part of the prologue has the Green Saber clips put into random positions before it changes to a much earlier scene. For example, when the Green Saber leaves Grove Street, it cuts to Hernandez's first shift with Crash. Then another Green Saber clip before it cuts to Salvatore Leone in Las Venturas. Then back to midday where Tenpenny is murdering Pendlebury in broad daylight pretty much. Then we get the payoff to the Green Saber's drive-by. It's likely a design choice for maximum emotional payoff, since this prologue film ends just as Beverly gets killed with Sweetcorn and CJ. But in the order the film takes place, Tenpenny murdering Pendlebury is the final chronological scene. If I had to guess, the Green Saber incident took place on the same night Tenpenny was threatening the Ballers on the phone halfway through the film. So during the intro, Tenpenny and Pulaski are discussing Ralph Pendlebury and him reporting Tenpenny's corrupt activities, which of course results in his death. Which in GTA lore, Tenpenny claims CJ did the murder 10 minutes before he even got off the plane.
This is a weapon, Officer Pulaski, that was used to gun down a police officer not 10 minutes ago. Officer Pendlebury, a fine man I might add.
So it's extremely unlikely Tenpenny had the exact details of when CJ would be arriving in Los Santos, seeing as he was in with Smoke. Smoke likely knew the day of the funeral, but even then it still seems problematic with that kind of tight timing. For all Tenpenny or Big Smoke knew, maybe CJ would have arrived say a week earlier. We know CJ does arrive dead on the day of the funeral and actually turns up late to it, as Sweet even says that's another funeral you ran away from, likely meaning CJ missed the church service and arrived just in time for the burial. So one thing we learn in the 30-minute intro film to San Andreas is CJ and Sweet do not have the best relationship at all. Smoke asks Sweet if he's heard from CJ lately and Sweet says we ain't speaking, he's got his own life. And since Big Smoke is asking that, it confirms neither Sweet or Smoke are keeping in contact with CJ when he's living in Liberty City. We do see that Sweet does call CJ to inform him of Beverly's death, so it's likely either Sweet does have CJ's phone number and they just never spoke at all over Brian's death, or Beverly had CJ's number and Sweet rushed to find it after Beverly's murder. If anyone would know about CJ's return to Los Santos for the funeral, it likely would either be him or Kendall, since she was also on the steps when Sweet phoned CJ. But of course, they would never work with Tenpenny due to the history the Johnson family or the entirety of Grove Street have with Crash. So what about Big Smoke? We do know he's eventually out to be working with Tenpenny and the Ballers, but it's extremely unlikely he knew when CJ was coming home either, as he didn't even recognise Carl when he was mourning over his mum's photos. But he does know about the funeral date, and does drive CJ there where the rest of the gang are waiting, before they all get attacked and drive by from the Ballers, which may or may not have been orchestrated by Smoke as we later learn. Some may notice and wonder why Big Smoke wasn't at the funeral and was in CJ's home, which I also think is an interesting question. I mean, all the other Grove Street gang members are there, Ryder, Sweet, Kendall and whatever, so why not Smoke? But I think Sweet berating CJ and not Smoke, maybe Smoke did attend the funeral and went back to Grove Street after the service. It doesn't explain why he's in the Johnson house however, maybe trying to ransack it before Sweet returns, who knows. So either way, I think it's unlikely that Big Smoke sort of sets CJ up here. But we don't know anything about Ryder during this time. Even during the first 2 missions, Ryder is, let's say, less than enthusiastic. He's not surprised or pissed off about CJ's return, he just remains not caring about it, you know. OG Loke of course was in prison during this time, and I don't think he has anything to do with Crash or the Ballers or whatever, so we can cross him off the list. To be honest, it does look incredibly unlikely Tenpenny was tipped off about CJ's return, because going off the timing and the lore that we know, it just seems incredibly unlikely Tenpenny would have caught CJ based on somebody else's comments. Honestly, I don't think anybody informed Tenpenny that CJ would be arriving home. But instead, I think the most likely outcome is it was just some really bad luck on CJ's part. So this next part is going to feature some amazing animation, so be prepared. So, most likely due to the history the Johnson family have with Crash, and the fact Ocean Docks are extremely close to the airport, I think it's clear Tenpenny chose a secluded place in the docks would be perfect to carry out the attack. It's out of public view and they could easily frame whoever they wanted. And since Pendlebury died about 10 minutes before CJ even got off the plane, we can assume CJ did arrive in Los Santos just as the attack was carried out. So straight after Pendlebury's death, Crash drove alongside this route, just as CJ was waiting for his taxi. It's likely that just as CJ hopped inside his cab to get to Grove Street, Tenpenny caught the cab pulling out and recognised CJ in the passenger seat and tailgated them for most of the journey to see if it was CJ before arresting them at the back of his own home. Now, if this is how Tenpenny chose CJ for the crime, it probably was a case of some really bad timing for CJ. But if the attack on Pendlebury took place even an hour later, it's quite likely CJ would never have been framed by Tenpenny, and someone else probably would have got the rap. But the question is, who would have got the rap for the murder if CJ never did it? I think it likely would have been Sweet that Tenpenny would have framed instead. We know Tenpenny, Smoke and the Ballers are working together to bring Grove Street down, and had they failed to kill Sweet, maybe getting him framed would be the next best thing to really harm Grove Street's leadership. And they kinda do succeed with that massive shootout mission, which does end up with Sweet getting incarcerated and CJ being borderline banished from Los Santos as Grove Street falls into complete nothingness and the Ballers and Vargos take over. But yeah, that's just my theory for the San Andreas intro. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.